Folks, we are now 15 days into the kidnapping of 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie. And this case has officially entered into what detectives call the behavioral phase of an investigation. The first week was chaos. The second week was evidence collection. Now investigators are trying to understand the offender because when a victim is not recovered quickly, the case stops being about what happened and becomes about who would do this. Tonight, we're looking to break down new forensic evidence, what investigators are trying to track down, for example, her pacemaker, what victimology is telling detectives, and the growing tension between the FBI and the Pima County Sheriff's Office. Quick reminder, if you're looking for real crime insight, not YouTube theories, this channel is different. I'm a retired NYPD Sergeant, and on Police Off the Cuff, we analyze cases the way cops and prosecutors do, what matters, what doesn't, and what the internet gets wrong. If that's the perspective you want, subscribe now because this isn't entertainment. This is experience. And also, folks, we just like to remind you that Police Off the Cuff is sponsored by FanDuel on the Believe Network. And also, folks, it will help us hit the subscribe button, share us, make comments with your friends and family, and that will help us grow. And we thank you all for doing that. So, folks, hold on to your hats, hold on to your loved ones, hold on to your thoughts. Hold on to your prayers. Hold on to your service dog. Hold on to your chicken parmesan hero. You're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the off-the-cuff zone. The Police Off the Cuff zone.
There has to be some common sense.
They were the ones who called 911 to get him help, and now they're calling for change.
Joining me on tonight's show is retired NYPD Sergeant, professor at Albertus Magnus College in Connecticut, attorney at law. Welcome to the show, Professor Michael Geary. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, Bill. Good evening. Good to see you. Thank you for having me on the show tonight.
You know, Mike, a lot of things coming out, but I mean, as much as new things come out, the press would have us to believe everything is the smoking damn gun. You know, everything is a smoking gun. And as people can see, the thumbnail I put up for tonight's show, this one is more like it, was kidnapping stage. And I'm at the point in this investigation, 15 days into this case, I don't believe this is a kidnapping. And I would have sworn that this was a kidnapping day one, day two, and the whole weekend into the second week. Now there's so many things that I question, and I don't think what we have here is a kidnapping. Mike, your thoughts?
Bill, you're in good company because, you know, Phil and I have talked about this and we've talked about it off the air. And we all think that this was, and other commentators have mentioned too, that this is not the kind of thing that you would see. The mechanics of everything going on is a kidnapping. Kidnappings tend to be brief. The people who have who are the kidnappers, they don't want to have that victim any longer than necessary. It doesn't matter if they're 25 years old, or in this case, an 84-year-old lady. You do not want to be responsible for her health in that, and for any length of time more than necessary. You want to get that ransom note to the family, arrange for the payment, get the payment, drop her someplace where she can be found, and get the heck out of there. You don't want this to go on any longer than necessary. 48 hours, 72 hours, whatever it is, the quickest that you can get that money and go do it. This is way too long. It's way too convoluted with the Bitcoin stuff. We think, and I think that this is something more akin to like a burglary or maybe even a home invasion that went wrong and went sideways. Maybe I believe this is probably some local ne'er-do-wells in this neighborhood that did this sort of thing, somebody local in the Tucson area. But yeah, this is not, I'll bet my paycheck, this is not a kidnapping. At this point,
you know,
no.
like someone in the chat just said, then what the hell is it?
Right.
And like you just designed the whole pattern of it.
Yeah.
I think it was a burglary or a home invasion that went bad and it got violent.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, they removed Nancy Guthrie from that scene. And that has exacerbated, of course, the investigation and finding out who did this. And then, so people will ask, well, then Why these ransom notes? I think they're all fake. I
Mhm.
think the ransom notes are from people on the periphery of this crime that are trying to interject themselves in it and try to get paid, and then when they had nothing to do with this. And that's why the FBI and the Pima County Sheriff's Office has to be very careful with these broadcast stations, because the broadcast stations, it's in their interest to try to remain relevant. And you cannot have them running this investigation. And, Harvey Levin with TMZ, FBI, just quiet him down, because I think it's ridiculous. Every other day he's got a new kidnapping note. And most of the FBI's or most of the talking heads I've seen, they said, that is just not believable. But do they have to check it out? Yes, it's a lead. We got to check it out and close the lead. But I'm not buying it, Mike.
No, when people like Harvey Levin, and I don't blame him, he's got great stuff. He does great Hollywood stories, but in this case, he should have just quietly forwarded it on. But he wants to get more ratings for a show. But what he should do is just forward it on. Don't even comment on it, because the moment you start commenting on things, the more it gets broadcast, the message gets perverted, and after a while, the public starts to make up stories and believe certain things, and people go down rabbit holes. And then the public perception of what is going on gets twisted. And it'd be much better if there was periodic, really brief press statements, and that's it. And if everyone had, was not making up stuff from whole cloth, it would be a lot better. But right now, there's way too much direct involvement in this case with the media, the mass media. Yeah.
You're absolutely right. I'm going to play this video from Fox. And actually, he contacted me this morning, retired NYPD Lieutenant Darren Porcher, Dr. Darren Porcher. And he's reporting on this case for Fox News live from Tucson, Arizona. Let me just play this and we'll listen to Darren.
This afternoon, in the search for Nancy Guthrie, the FBI says one of the gloves recovered appears to match the gloves of the suspect in the surveillance video, and the FBI has recovered DNA from it. Let's bring in retired NYPD Lieutenant Darren Porcher. Darren, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
What is your reaction to this breaking news on the search for Nancy Guthrie, and specifically the glove with DNA in it?
Well, Mike, this is not just a lead. This has the potential to be breaking news, because this is the crack in the case that we're looking for. How can we apply an identification as it relates to who we saw in the video to a DNA sample? And fortunately, this seems as if it's going to come to fruition, because we're going to run this and we're going to place this information into the CODIS database to see if this individual, in fact, has DNA in the CODIS database. The CODIS database has information for all individuals that are arrested in the 1990s up until now. And hopefully this will be what we need to garner us into the directional path of rescuing Nancy, as well as bringing the perpetrators to custody as in relation to this case.
There was a big SWAT team FBI raid late Friday night that got a lot of us excited. I was watching very closely, but it did not produce any arrests. Does that disappoint you?
Well, Mike, it is disappointing, but at the same token, we have to take in consideration there was a magistrate that signed off on this warrant. In order for a magistrate to sign off on a warrant, there needs to be probable cause. And oftentimes, the magistrates or the judges will demand information to support if probable cause exists as it relates to what law enforcement brings forth. So it's an unfortunate occurrence, but this also shows that the men and women in law enforcement are vigorously working towards gaining a lead to concluding this case with an apprehension and bringing Nancy back home. So I don't see it as an error. I see it as police doing what's necessary to bring Nancy back home.
2 weeks later, do you think Nancy Guthrie is in that close radius to her home, or do you fear she's far from Tucson at this point?
Well, Mike, we're 60 miles away from the Mexican border, and that's oftentimes been a point of contention as it relates to the international line and her possibly being brought there. I'm optimistic, and I genuinely believe that this is a localized operation, and I think that she's in the local area. However, one of the things that's being done right now is, based on her pacemaker, we have now flown overhead devices to try to connect with the pacemaker to find to see if we can find her in this localized area. So I'm hopeful that she's still in this area of Tucson and we can bring her back.
You know, Mike, I have a little bit, and I love Darren Porcher. Great guy, good friend of mine. As soon as he saw that I was looking to have him on my show, he jumped and called me. We just had some technical difficulties, and I couldn't put him on. Anyway, right now they have something called a signal sniffer.
Yeah.
And they're going to fly over the Tucson area with a helicopter to try and locate Nancy Guthrie, locate her heart device, her pacemaker, exactly. And my question is, Mike, this is day 15. Why didn't you think of this on day 2 or day 3? This whole case, there's been a lot of snafus. I will have to say that. And none of us like to criticize other law enforcement agencies, but I can just list a couple of them. The mistakes in the messaging. And that's one of the biggest areas where there's been huge mistakes. And I think that you need a professional public relations guy, public relations person that is going to talk for the police department. And the sheriff Nanos, I don't think he's trained in this. I don't think he's ever had a case of this size. So a lot of the information that's going out there is a day late and a dollar short, but also incorrect in many. And then he tries to pull it back. It's too late. You already gave wrong information. You know, the other thing is releasing the crime scene too early. That was huge. It's still huge. It still may affect the case that he released that crime scene way too soon. And what does that do? Well, it doesn't allow the crime scene to be protected. So people go traipsing through it because it's no longer considered a crime scene. It's returned back to the family. I don't know if they allowed the family to go. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh no, we're going to make it a crime scene again. Guess what? It's too late. And if they arrest somebody down the road, that also hurts the prosecution. Because the defense attorney is going to say, look, that could be anyone's DNA. You opened the crime scene the day after it happened, 2 days after it happened. How can you explain that? You can't. You can't. And it's really a demerit, a mistake against law enforcement. The press. I cannot believe what I see when they show drone footage of the press around Nancy Guthrie's house. It looks like there's a New York Giants game. It looks like the crowd at a football game. And I'm just like, you know, all right, that much of press wants to cover this story. Law enforcement, get them 1,000 feet back and don't let them follow you to search warrants. Don't let them follow you into the woods as you're looking for evidence. None of that has been controlled by the police department. Ridiculous, right? Sending the glove evidence to a private lab. What are you doing? You know, you got the FBI on the scene. You got one of the greatest law enforcement agencies with the greatest lab in the world, and you're sending this to a private lab in Miami. Not a high enough reward for whoever, leading to the arrest and conviction to whoever did this. There should be a $250,000 to a $500,000 reward. At first, it was $2,500. That's laughable. That it was $50. Now it's $100. That's still not enough. You want people to talk? Bring the Benjamins. Bring $500,000, and you'll get people starting to talk. What is the problem with that? This is a huge case. Come up with $500,000, Mike.
Yeah, the messaging was horrible. I mean, I got to give that a D minus, because we saw this in the Brown University shooting when you had the mayor saying certain things. You had the local Providence Police Department chief saying things. You had the chief of head of security for Brown saying things. Things were said. Things had to be walked back. Things were said that were inaccurate. We saw the same thing here. Everybody's got to be on the same page, because this is going to get national attention, and get out ahead of the story and let people know, satisfy the media. They're going to be very curious. Give them enough information. You're not lying. You're just being very vague on certain things so that they don't go running, down a rabbit hole somewhere. But be consistent. That is really important here. Securing the crime scene. The moment there was a drop of Ms. Nancy Guthrie's blood seen somewhere right around the front door, near the front door area, that vestibule area, immediately, if not before, okay, cordon off the entire property. That's blood. That's a crime scene until we determine otherwise. And if you're going to allow other people to come on to the property, it would be maybe one member of the Guthrie family who knows the inside of that house really well, who could look around with the assistance of a police officer to say, don't touch anything, look in the bedroom. Does anything look disturbed here? Could you, what do you see? And then escort them out. That's it. That should have been tightly controlled. You should have had a radio car there, marked police officer, radio car. Anybody touching that property, you want to know who they are, what rank they are, what department they work for. Tightly control all that. They didn't. It was, and some of the things are, they got some evidence, but they lost some. And the problem is we don't know how much evidence was actually lost. We're only going to know how much evidence we gather, but we may have gotten more if they had more tightly controlled on the crime scene. Lieutenant Parcher, he's very optimistic. That glove may be the glove. We don't know. It was found somewhere outside the property area nearby. I'm not sure what that exactly the distance was. It may be relevant because it looks very much like it, but it may not. So I don't want people to get their hopes up too much. Like, this is it. We're going to get the DNA off this guy. We're going to load it up into CODIS, and within 24 hours, we're going to have him under arrest. That would be beautiful. That's what you'd see in a like Law and Order show on TV. But this may not be the glove whatsoever. So I don't want anybody to get their hopes up.
100%. At Hey Jude-DO8HV, what do you think of Fox saying the glove and DNA match? Well, at Hey Jude at DO8HV, that's not what they said. They said the glove and the glove that the home invader or the kidnapper, it looks like the same glove. They were very careful at how they don't have DNA from, they have DNA from the glove they found. They don't have DNA because they never recovered the glove from the perpetrator unless, and that's another thing that's unclear. Did they or did they not recover a glove inside the home of Nancy Guthrie? Because Sheriff Nano said they did, and then he pulled it back. So it's very difficult to say. And let me just remind you, there's several steps to this. Now, the glove that Sheriff Nano sent to the Miami lab has to be retrieved, which is a problem because now
chain of custody.
Chain of custody is a problem, and a defense attorney will eat you up about that. And then it has to be tested by the FBI lab in Quantico, Virginia, and then go into the CODIS database, which stands for Combined DNA Index System, of which there are two categories. There are offender DNA, which are offenders who have been arrested, actually convicted of certain crimes. And then there is something called forensic DNA. And forensic DNA is unidentified DNA that comes from a crime scene. So potentially you could match this up to a crime scene, but you still don't know who it is, but it could give you more investigative leads. So see what I mean about the communication? This is not a smoking gun. They said this looks like the glove that the perp that broke into the house was wearing on that night. It is not the glove, and only one of the gloves has DNA on it because they don't have the glove from the perpetrator. Mike.
Yeah, under the best of circumstances, this is the glove, but in reality, we don't know yet. And even if it did have DNA in it, even if this is that person who you saw in the video, even if that is absolutely the glove he had on his left hand or right hand, the fact is, if he has never been convicted of a crime that involves taking his DNA and uploading it into CODIS, we won't know whose it is. It's like a fingerprint, getting a fingerprint from a crime scene. That's wonderful. You want to match it to a perp in an FBI or state, like say New York State database. You got to hope that fingerprint, that person's fingerprint has already been loaded up, maybe months, years earlier, But if not, if they've never been fingerprinted, you're not going to get a hit on it. That's why I don't want the public to get so, and you're saying it like, yeah, don't get your hopes up, because realistically, we're not sure. Under the best circumstances, yes, but the chances of it being the glove, that's a very low proposition.
Absolutely. This is News Nation with Brian Enton.
They're going to send the DNA. The sheriff is probably going to send that DNA to that private lab in Florida, which specializes in touch DNA. And they can do a one-to-one comparison with the known DNA that they have and this person to see if it matches. What they cannot do is they don't have the ability to run it through CODIS. So it's going to have to go probably to the FBI lab at that point, so that we can keep this lab situation down to a manageable number. And then the FBI or the sheriff's department can run it through CODIS, the National Database for DNA, and then determine if that, will hit with anyone else. But the DNA sample that the FBI is, or that the private lab is in possession of, if they have sent it back to the lab, to the sheriff already, it's already in CODIS. If they haven't, then they're going to have to send it back to the sheriff or to the FBI to get it uploaded into CODIS and then compared.
Maureen, we've all seen the horrifying, frightening photos from the front of the house that the FBI was able to get off the Google Nest camera of the man, covered from head to toe. Do you think, and I've thought a lot about this, do you think someone else involved, and I don't mean just someone else to plan this thing, I mean someone else who was actually at the house that night and also went into the house to kidnap Nancy?
Well, obviously we're not sure, but I would say it's probably likely there was someone driving the car. And the car could have been right there in the driveway. It could have been halfway through the circle driveway. We don't have the entire video. I'm sure the FBI has much more video. Did this person attempt to open the front door here? Did they have a key to the front door? Did they go around to the back door? Do we have that video? There's just a lot of unanswered questions, but for me, it would make a lot more sense if you had at least two people involved in this conspiracy and the other person was driving the vehicle.
Why do you think his backpack is so full, Maureen? It looks stuffed. I mean, what do you think could be in there?
Violent criminals, he's obviously got a proclivity to violence, and that's one of the questions when you're trying to analyze the offender of a situation like this. He's got a proclivity and a predisposition to violence because she was bleeding on the front steps when she left. So there's just no question there. That is an actual fact that we know. So, and he's got that gun on his waistband, but with regard to that backpack, could he have a tarp? Could he have restraints? Could he have tape? Those would be the things I would expect to find in something like that. He could have.
In New York City, they used to have a home invasion task force, and mostly they worked up in Washington Heights because that's where most of the home invasions occurred in the city. And it was very common for the home invaders to bring what they called the home invasion kit, their kit that they would bring. And in that kit was what this FBI agent is saying. There was duct tape, there was knives, there was rope, there was hammers, there was all kinds of things that they would use. There was an iron, because home invaders, they were dealing with mostly drug locations. And they would bring a hot iron and torture the drug dealers in the house who wouldn't tell them where the drugs and the money was. So they would take a hot iron and put it right on their buttocks. And that happened a great deal of time. So this is not something that in law enforcement we don't know about. I'm hoping no one was that violent with an 84-year-old woman, but this FBI agent is right. There's signs of violence. This dude came there with a gun, right? There was blood on this front step. So and she didn't leave her home voluntarily. So there was violence during this. So, we go back to the whole premise. Is this a kidnapping or is this something else? And is the kidnapping being staged to try to cover up the criminals who did this? And to tell you the truth, I don't know what this is at this point. I really don't. And I join hundreds and thousands of other former law enforcement officers that are perplexed by this, don't know what this is. Never mind the law enforcement officers that are actively working this. They don't know what it is either. But the smoke and mirrors of this, getting these new ransom notes every few days, that doesn't help anyone, Mike.
Yeah, we can't read exactly what's in this perpetrator's head as he's trying to get into the house, trying to cover up. It's bizarre. It could be that they knew who this was. They knew who she was, who her daughter was. They knew her daughter was a celebrity, and may have been believed. May believe that there was a lot of money to be made. Maybe it was going to be maybe it was going to be a kidnapping and it just went south, sideways. Maybe it was a burglary, but I don't think they picked this house at random. They knew whose house they were going into. Whatever they were thinking, it went south real bad, went sideways real bad, and they may have dragged her out of the house. She was injured, and I don't think that there's any good news as far as Ms. Guthrie's health, but this is FUBAR beyond belief at this point. It's a total snafu.
I think you're right.
Right now, I think it's a recovery mission, not a rescue mission.
Yeah, unfortunately, Mike, I agree with you. 15 days since this 84-year-old woman was taken, assaulted, whatever occurred to her in her home. It's not a good sign. This is, again, News Nation, but talking about the timeline during this case.
Sunday, January 31st, just about 30 minutes before sunset, Nancy Guthrie travels by Uber to the home of her oldest daughter, Annie. After dinner and games, son-in-law Tommaso Sioni brings her home. The time is 9:48. 2 minutes pass, and the 84-year-old's garage door closes. After midnight, Monday, February 1st, a masked, armed man approaches Nancy's door. Head down, he focuses in on the home's doorbell camera, then turns back to grab foliage in a clumsy attempt to cover the device.
There's no question that this was planned.
By 1:47 a.m., that Nest Cam is disconnected. At 2:12 a.m., another house camera detects movement. 16 minutes later, 2:28, Nancy's pacemaker disconnects from the app on her phone. Later that morning, a friend who regularly hosts Nancy to watch a streamed church service alerts the family that she's absent. 11:56, family goes to Nancy's home to investigate. 7 minutes later, 911 is called.
Nancy Debrick, 84-year-old white female, 5'4", 150, brown and blue, last and wearing unknown clothing.
12:15, sheriff's deputies arrive at Nancy's house and the search begins.
Breaking overnight, Nancy Guthrie, Savannah's 84-year-old mother, now at the center of a missing persons case.
Monday, February 2nd, the nation wakes to learn of Guthrie's family's nightmare. The Today Show begins without Savannah and with grave news.
And our thoughts and our prayers are with our dear friend and colleague and her family this morning.
We saw some things at the home that were concerning to us.
9 a.m., the Pena County Sheriff's press conference is carried live from coast to coast.
This is a 84-year-old lady who suffers from some physical ailments, is in need of medication that if she doesn't have in 24 hours, it could be fatal.
A local TV station receives a ransom note with specific details about what Nancy was wearing and with two distinct deadlines.
We're gathering some DNA samples to get those to our crime lab. But yes, it's evident to us that she was moved from that house against her will.
By the next day, Tuesday, February 3rd, the sheriff updates News Nation about that DNA.
It confirmed that the DNA that we found belonged to Nancy, Savannah's mom.
It's announced that Savannah will be pulling out of Olympics coverage, and she asked the nation, just pray on Instagram. While sheriff's helicopters circle, News Nation brings viewers a sobering scene. We were able to get up close to the house right near the front door, and there is blood. There is a blood trail near the front door.
Right there, in my mind, that is criminal, that they allowed the press to walk up to the front door. Who's running this investigation? And how do you keep the press back? You have physical officers, police officers standing there, but not just that, surround the entire house with crime scene tape and don't allow anyone to walk inside the cordoned off area. How hard is that to do? Crime scene 101, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, you and I and Phil have seen many crime scenes that are totally messed up out on the street, in alleyways, in apartment buildings, in homes. And sometimes the place is a wreck. Sometimes it's a lobby of a building, where people are coming and going, and you're trying to control the crime scene there. You have all these issues, but this is an isolated home. You get a bunch of orange traffic cones. You get 1,000 feet of that of the police do not cross tape, and start putting it around, and have a few cops doing perimeter and telling everybody, you have to get back. You have to get back. And that's it. And that has to be done. You have to keep the people there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to make sure that nobody sneaks around. I love Brian Hinton. He's an excellent journalist, really excellent work, excellent. But in this case, how he didn't know that walking up to that house, and standing where that perp was, although at that time they didn't have the video public, but why would you do that? Why would you do that? That's not a good journalist instinct. Everybody should have been respectful. These journalists should know better. If you're a journalist for a local news station or a national news station, to stay far away from crime scenes. It got out of control. It went to hell real quick.
Mike, journalists will do whatever they can get away with because they're concerned with their story. They're concerned with being first. They're concerned with getting information that no one else has. So I say, I agree. Brian Hinton I love the guy. I think he's great. And, but I see this from a police perspective.
Right.
And there's certain things the police, they have to control. And one of them is the crime scene. They have to control that crime scene. And it has not been controlled here at all. Any shape or form, it has not been controlled. Let me go back to it.
Of Nancy Guthrie's house. Wednesday, February 4th, days after the crime scene is released, law enforcement converges with dogs, a perimeter, and investigators all over the property.
Are they getting things in the garage, or are they just using it to go in and out?
And love for her daughters and family.
Nancy's neighbors gather in prayer.
Hang in there, Nancy. You got this.
President Trump posts pledging immediate federal support.
On behalf of our family.
And for the first time, we hear from the anguished family, directly addressing the kidnapper.
She is a devoted friend. She is full of kindness and knowledge. Talk to her and you'll see.
Thursday, February 5th sees a meager reward for information bump up to $50,000. Deputies canvass behind Annie Guthrie's home. A 5 p.m. ransom deadline comes and goes, and Nancy's only son posts a message.
Whoever is out there holding our mother, we want to hear from you.
The FBI deploys digital billboards on Friday, February 6th. Nancy's car is towed. We learn another ransom note goes to a local TV station.
Is it, written by the same person? It's very difficult to tell.
And reporters aboard Air Force One get a briefing.
We have some clues, I think, that are very strong, and I think we could have some answers coming up fairly soon.
Saturday, February 7th, brings a flurry of activity both at Nancy and Annie Guthrie's home.
So I'm outside Annie Guthrie's house. Camera flashes from inside the house coming from the windows. So
Nancy's children release another emotional video.
We received your message and we understand. We beg you now to return our mother to us.
The septic tank behind Nancy's home is searched on Sunday the 8th.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download.
Sorry, I wasn't quick enough to remove Cuomo. Someone just Brandon at Brandon L. Richard. Once the police tape comes down and police leave, we always walk up to the house and knock or leave our cards. Journalism 101. Brandon, I'm not blaming you. You're right. You're doing your job. I'm blaming the police for not being there to stop you from doing that. You're doing what you should do. Absolutely. But you know something? That doesn't mean the police should let journalists walk onto the property Bring Locard's principle of exchange. When you walk into a crime scene, you bring things from your body into the crime scene. When you leave, you take things out. Contamination, cross-contamination. And that is crime scene 101. And believe me, I'm not blaming the journalists. The journalists they're doing their job, and they're going to do whatever they can get away with. But I'm blaming the police. Did anyone see any police officer, any crime scene tape surrounding the perimeter of that house that didn't allow anyone to walk on the property? I didn't. I absolutely didn't. Did you, Mike?
Yeah, I saw some videos, but I'm not sure what day it was. I think it was like day 4 or day 5, and that was a huge mistake. It should have been done when the family called and the police officer responded from Pima County, and they realized, okay, this isn't a person with dementia. This is a lady, and she probably something seriously bad happened. Tape that crime scene off. And it should have been a crime scene from that moment on. And I saw a videotape, but it was days later, Bill. And whatever information you can get from a gravel driveway in terms of cars or footprints or anything like that, it was ruined by that point.
100%, Mike. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff. If you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, share a like. It helps our algorithm. Also, if you want to contribute to us financially, we have a Patreon with 4 different levels. We also have a YouTube channel membership with 5 different levels, and you can become a Police Off the Cuffer by joining our membership. One of the things we also found out, and I thought this was great, but I don't know, it's never been commented on by law enforcement. This is a sketch that was done by a 42-year-old veteran. Her name is Lois Gibson, who worked for the Houston Police Department for 42 years. And not only is she a forensic artist, but she also recreates how bodies would look, bodies that have been recovered through the bones and the things that they recovered. She spoke about drawing this. But my question is also, how come law enforcement hasn't commented on this? And I know that if someone did this, a civilian did this, even with the law enforcement background she has, and they handed it to the NYPD, they would not accept it, because they would only accept it if Detective so-and-so did it from the NYPD sketch unit. So no one from law enforcement has commented on it. So this is Lois Gibson.
The first and last name.
This is Lois Gibson.
Okay, very nice. The icon, if you will. What should I use for your title here for your story?
I'm a forensic artist. That's all.
Very nice.
And mostly I do witness memory. I'm going to talk to somebody and get them to remember the person that represents the worst thing in their life. And that's mostly what I do. I also do facial reconstructions. If somebody's murdered and we don't find them till they're down to the bone, you can't solve it. The detective can't solve it unless they know who's dead. So they give this to me and I reconstruct, and I do those readily.
Wow. Okay. So tell me, what first went through your mind? Because you retired in 2021, right?
Yes.
Okay. And this case brought you out of retirement. Talk to me about that.
When I saw the kidnapping, because I've gotten 8 people back that were kidnapped, I knew the pain that the loved ones were going through. And it's the most horrific, insane torture if you have a kidnapping. Now, if somebody's murdered, it's terrible, but it's more peaceful because you have a funeral. Yeah, and it's finished and it's done and you know what's happening. If somebody's kidnapped and you love them, the torture, every minute seems like a half hour, because you say, where are they? Are they being killed? Can I stop it? What's happening? And it's torture. And so I knew that. And I held off. Immediately when I saw these, I wanted to try. And I said, stop it, stop it, stop it. Don't. And then they found somebody, but it wasn't him, and it was released. And then I waited another day and I said, you can't do that. And I got busy with another case, a serial killing. I had to go south to Lamarck. But then I came back and it was too late to do it. And I got up the next day and they still hadn't caught him. And I came in here. And if you have emotion, I want to help the Guthrie family, because I have a feeling how they feel. It's the worst thing in the world. I wanted to find him. and this is too much guessing. But I just did it because I'm brave with my art. And I just went, okay. And I couldn't stop myself. And I went in here and I threw it on there. And I have pieces of it. There's the top of the mustache and the bottom tuft. And I just assume that he goes ahead and does this instead of just one of these, which some people do. And then he's not a Hitler. He doesn't shave it like Hitler. No, that mustache, and you can see it goes a little further. So I drew it all the way out. Like this is normal. I'm trying to think, what do most guys do? And then I could see the eyes. Oh, yeah. I could see the eyelids. Yes. And they're brown eyes. Okay. That's the flash of light. And then that's the shadow of the eye openings of the ski mask. That right there. He doesn't have Betty Boop completely tweezed pencil. No. So right here, you can actually see a tuft of eyebrow. So, of course, what am I going to do? That color for the eyebrows. I just put a standard eyebrow on him. The eyes that I could see the shape, and mathematical probability is their brown eyes.
You know, Lou Lemoracco, thanks for your comment. But how forensic sketch artists make the sketch is usually from interviewing a witness. Since there is no witness here, the witness is the camera and the video that was recovered. So she drew this sketch from the video image. And as we know, if you look at this, there's not much of his face that is revealed. So she had to sort of fill in the blanks. And if this was just John Q. Citizen doing a sketch because they enjoyed art, I wouldn't take much validity in it. But this is a 42-year veteran from the Houston Police Department that did this for a living for 42 years. But we also must add that this has been out now for 3-4 days, and so far no one has identified this man through this sketch. So it's perplexing. You would think that the sketch would be good enough to at least to get, and I don't know for a fact because there's a tips line. Probably many people have called in on the tips line and says, "Oh, that's so and so. I know that dude. He lives blah 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 blah." So that's a possibility, but I don't think we can fault this lady, Lois Gibson. I think she gave it a hell of a try, Mike.
Yeah, Bill, this lady is, like you say, she's just not some random person. She's a veteran. She's done this 1,000 times, at least in her career, putting together information. If she's talking about putting flesh onto a skull that was found in the woods, you know, people can do that. It's art and science and probability, and that's what she talked about. I would take this lady's work really seriously. And the fact that, you know, no, it appears, so far as we know, that nobody from the Pima County Sheriff's Office has contacted her and said, "What do you need? Can we let's look this over? Do you mind if you want to work with, you know, come into our office or the FBI?" Since it doesn't seem they're taking this seriously, I'm disappointed because I would expect that if you are saying you're leaving no stone unturned in this investigation to bring back Nancy Guthrie, that you would talk to this lady, and because she's just not a fly-by-night person. She knows what the hell she's doing.
Or shouldn't the FBI or the Pima County Sheriff's Office responded with their own sketch artist?
Yeah.
And drew their own sketch. I can't believe they didn't do that. And why wouldn't they do that? They're not reacting perhaps, but this is a law enforcement, let's put it this way, a former law enforcement professional. It's not someone from the press.
No.
It's not someone that's just an artist. This is someone that did this for a living for 42 years. So I think that the FBI and the Pima County Sheriff's Office should have responded with their own sketch. And the fact that they haven't added to the mistakes they've made in this investigation.
I think so.
This is, again, Lieutenant Darren Porcher, who's all over the scene here. And he's a retired NYPD lieutenant, Dr. Darren Porcher, actually. And he's also a former narcotics undercover.
NYPD Lieutenant and undercover narcotics officer Darren Porcher, who is also on the ground in Tucson. Darren, we're so glad to have you. So there are reports that there were 3 individuals detained last night in relation to this case, but no one has been arrested or is in custody. So walk us through why authorities would detain someone if they weren't necessarily a suspect.
Well, thanks for having me as a guest. The reason why authorities were able to detain these individuals is because they had a warrant from a magistrate which elicited probable cause. Law enforcement needs probable cause to apply for and receive a warrant. So based on those two components, both law enforcement and the judge, it was an appropriate action. In addition to that, we had a vehicle that was stopped at a culvert, which is a fast food restaurant relatively close to here. That individual was released as well, but once again, it was a warrant that was the determining factor as to law enforcement stopping these individuals, but unfortunately, they've all been released. But at the same token, this is not at a loss, because there may have been information that law enforcement was able to extract from all of the individuals involved as we move forward in the investigational process.
Darren, it's Joey. Thanks for joining us. I know you have a title. It might be doctor at this point. I think. I know you've worked hard there. But this is the question I have. We've all
Joey.
heard people say probable cause. Can you explain to us? I know you're just kind of guessing, but can you explain to us what that might look like? I think it's important to understand. This person happened to be seen on a Ring doorbell at some point in the last 2 weeks. That's not probable cause. Like, what is it? At what level of action or evidence would it take to be able to get a warrant like that?
Probable cause is what would lead a reasonable police officer to believe that the individual in question committed a criminal act or they were a part of a criminal entity. That's probable cause. It's very different than the conviction standard, which is beyond a reasonable doubt. You need beyond a reasonable doubt to convict someone, but probable cause is the standard of proof necessary to take a person into custody to answer for a charge in question.
And the same thing, Darren, is Dr. Darren Porcher. The same thing is true for a search warrant. And I, for some reason, have the definition of probable cause committed to memory. And it's facts and circumstances that would allow a reasonable person to believe that a crime has been committed and the person being arrested committed that crime. Verbatim, go look it up, go Google it, probable cause. So the same thing applies to a search warrant. Facts and circumstances will allow a reasonable person to believe that this home, this facility, is being used to commit a crime. And the people that committed this crime may own or use this home. So the facts and circumstances have to be presented to a judge. And if a judge doesn't think there's probable cause, he will not sign the warrant. But in this case, he did sign the warrant. So they obviously had some evidence. They just don't go bust in there of saying, oh, someone said these guys are suspicious. No, they need probable cause. Mike, you're the attorney. Maybe you could explain it better.
Well, yeah, as he said, you have to have a certain level. It's not the proof beyond reasonable doubt for a trial, which is really very, very tremendous certainty. This is probable cause. Probable. You believe based on your law enforcement experience, what a person has told you, what evidence you've uncovered, clues you've uncovered that would lead you to believe that this person, is or about to commit a crime. And therefore, you could seize them with that warrant and interrogate them, bring them in for interrogation. Now, it could also be that you got a search warrant for that home. Maybe that the gray truck we were talking about was seen coming into that home and going into their garage. Then you want a search warrant for that truck and that garage and that home. So the search warrant is for that premises, and therefore there is some belief. Now, it's not just I don't like this person, so I'm going to make a tip line phone call and say, yeah, this is the bad guy, and harass him. No. That is a tip. A tip does not give you probable cause. It's tips and other things that together, circumstantially, like we talked about circumstantial evidence before, adds up to what the police believe is probable cause. Go to the judge. If the judge agrees with you that looks solid, they'll issue your arrest warrant, your search warrant, whatever it happens to be. So it's not 100% certainty, and people think it is. It's not 100% certainty, but it is some level, but it's not nearly as certain as, say, proof beyond reasonable doubt. Police officers get search warrants and arrest warrants, all the time in America, And this is how law, and that's a good thing because they're following the requirements of the Fourth Amendment. That's a good thing.
Mike, you're 100% great explanation there. And, and one of the things, I know no one asked this question, but I want to address it. Lou Lemoracco asked me to explain the emergency exception to a search warrant. And that's known as exigent circumstances. And in a situation like this, they could have just busted into the home because this is a kidnapping.
Right.
And we don't know whether or not the person who was kidnapped, allegedly was kidnapped, is on the premises or being tortured or being obviously held against her will. So they could have exercised this warrant without a search warrant. The other thing that we mentioned on our show the other night was when they brought these people in, and this is where the media doesn't get it. You cannot forcibly bring someone into a police facility and just say, oh, we're conducting an investigation. You must put handcuffs on them and tell them they're under arrest. And after you conduct your investigation, if it's determined that they are not the guilty parties or not the people, or there's no longer probable cause, you release them. But you just can't say, oh, we're conducting an investigation, we're going to take your whole family. Put your hands behind your back. No, they are under arrest. So they had at least probable cause because that's the standard you need to arrest someone, probable cause. So as happened in this case, they had probable cause. They brought the individuals in. They no longer had probable cause after they conducted their investigation, and they let them go. And the police are protected by the law of arrest for that, because can they get sued? Police officers get sued all the time for false arrest. But at least the word that everyone uses in the law, everyone uses in law enforcement, is reasonable. If you're reasonable, that is the standard that will protect you in a court of law. So, yeah, I mean, someone wrote, I mean, everyone has their doubts here about what actually happened. And I do too. I'm not convinced that this is still a kidnapping.
And that changes depending on the judge signing the warrant, basically? It's pretty much an opinion of the judge?
Well, it's not just an opinion. The judge is looking for supported conclusions to be introduced into the process. The judge oftentimes is going to check the information that's presented to them to determine if this is a reliable source and it's necessary to move forward as it relates to an arrest or a search in particular. So in this instance, we had a search, but we didn't have arrest. However, we did have individuals that were taken into custody, but they were referred to, which we'll refer to as detainees, but those individuals were not arrested.
Darren, it's Julie Banderas. Let me talk to you about the search area, because it seems that law enforcement have been focusing on the same area within a 2-mile vicinity or so of Nancy Guthrie's home for the last week and a half or so. Is that typical in a case like this? And then what would be your reaction to the ransom note that Harvey Levin had mentioned, which hints at possibly taking their search internationally, which was maybe possibly a way to throw off investigators? None of what Harvey Levin and TMZ have received has actually ever been verified. But is it typical to keep this search so close to home?
Well, when we think from the perspective of what's typical, we as law enforcement want to enlist the public as best as possible, because it takes an immense level of man hours to track and go to all of these homes within a 2-mile radius to where Nancy's residence is. So what we did, well, I should say what law enforcement did, was they put out a blast through Ring doorbell, and that alert basically told individuals that lived within that 2-mile radius, if you observed or you captured some level of suspicious or nefarious behavior, please report that to us as law enforcement so we can move forth and investigate this. This cuts down on a lot of man hours, and it affords the investigators the opportunity to work on additional components as it relates to this case. As it relates to Harvey Levin and these letters, I think the corroboration factor is key. You need to corroborate all of the information in these letters before you take them as a credible source as it relates to a ransom note. one of the things that I've seen, which is very rare, unique, actually, I want to say I've never seen a situation where a kidnapper introduced a ransom note to a media outlet.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, kidnappers will introduce a letter to the family, and usually it says something like, "Don't tell police or we'll kill you."
Yeah.
This is a very different scenario.
That's what I've been saying from the very
We're doing
beginning.
the best that we can to authenticate this.
Yeah, even Harvey Levin.
You know, Darren, Dr. Darren Porcher is 100% correct. That's why I think that those letters that are going to Harvey Levin are bullshit, absolute bullshit. But having said that, the FBI still needs to follow the lead. Marianne Mess 72, Huff 2000. If I'm ever murdered, I want Bill and Mike to investigate my case. God forbid, but thank you very much for the compliment. Yeah, I mean, look, I still feel, and I've said this from day one, that the answer to this case is in the victimology of Nancy Guthrie. And what does that mean? Well, if you watch our case or watch our show, I always refer to victimology as, and we all know ology means the study of the background of the victim. Who in Nancy Guthrie's background could have done this? Who was she seeing? We're talking about landscapers, contractors, people that work on her pool, cleaners, all the people that come into her house. All of those things we must deeply look into. We must look into a financial check, a financial check on a DMV check. How many cars does she own? Are they all there? Sometimes you can come up with a big lead just doing a DMV check or a finance check. All of those things are so important. And these are things that you don't just need the police to do. You need a district attorney on board right from the very beginning to start drawing up subpoenas and start taking a deep dive into the finances. Has she made any big withdrawals from the bank? Has anyone else made any big withdrawals from her bank account? So all of these things are things that we are not privy to. We do not know. And, you know, you could look on the ground now. You could see a million journalists out there. If they do an overhead shot with a drone, it looks like an NFL football game's parking lot. And at some point, if they don't solve this case, they're going to reduce greatly the amount of law enforcement that's working this case. And in addition, the press is going to lose interest after a certain point. Not totally, but they're not going to have the amount of press on the scene that they have right now. Let's hope that this case gets solved. And let's hope Nancy Guthrie is found and found alive. We are all praying that this is not a recovery, but a rescue. But I'm just giving my 27 years of law enforcement experience to you guys, and the fact that I no longer think this is a kidnapping. I really don't. And I'm not, you know, an investigative genius, you could say, because of A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Yeah, I could say that. But I would be parroting what a lot of other people have said during this case. And it doesn't have all the true signs of a kidnapping. So that's where I'm drawing my conclusions from. Mike.
Yeah, Bill, Phil has used the term acronym KISS, keep it simple, stupid. I think the most elementary, kind of straightforward answer is probably something along the lines of what actually happened, maybe a home invasion, a burglary. It was directed towards her. Along that line, you'd mentioned that, like, people coming onto the house, that premises, maybe somebody there local. Daryl777 in the chat, he suggested the way that that guy on the front porch had the light in his mouth, maybe an electrician, maybe a plumber. We all do that. Just think about it. You put the light in your mouth, or you put the phone in your pocket as you're working with both hands free. I thought it was a really good idea, and so that could possibly be. And I'm sure the FBI and the local police have checked out everyone, every single person, repair person, handyman, anybody that has gone onto that property in the last 6 months. I'm sure they've been checked out, or they're still checking out. And Lady Jane C., I think it's a good idea that it is possible that the people who were released, maybe they were released and the police are still suspicious of them, and they may be keeping tabs on their activity. Just because they're released doesn't mean they're innocent as as a little newborn baby. So it's possible the police are still looking at the people that they questioned but have released at this point.
Mike, 100%, they could still have those people under surveillance. Right now, we don't know. We're not privy to this investigation, the inside. Lady Jane C., member for 20 months. Are the last 3 released being monitored? I think we just answered that. But thank you, Lady Jane C., and thank you for being a member of the Police Off the Cuff family. So, I think it's good to talk about this, but yet we don't have any concrete answers. But I think when you talk about it, as detectives do, and Phil Grimaldi calls it spitballing, I call it hypothesizing and theorizing. And that's how you get to the bottom of this. Again, this is News Nation.
Everyone, in breaking news from the FBI in the case of missing Nancy Guthrie, the 84-year-old mother of Today Show host Savannah Guthrie. The FBI confirming that a glove recovered not far from Nancy's home is testing positive for male DNA. Those gloves appearing to match the ones seen in the Nest camera video that's been circulating. And that recovered footage shows the armed suspect seen trying to cover the lens outside Nancy's home the night she disappeared. More DNA testing is still being done, and results could come in as early as today. This DNA could be the critical piece of evidence that law enforcement's been waiting for. It could identify a suspect. The search for Nancy is now entering its 3rd week today. Well, good afternoon to you. I'm Anna Koyman here in New York City. It's Sunday, the 15th of February, 1 o'clock on the East Coast. It's time for News Nation Live. We thank you for choosing us for your breaking news coverage. We're going to get right to Jessica Cartalia, live for us on the ground in Tucson. What's the latest at this hour, Jessica?
Okay, so I want to break this all down for you, Anna, because we're just getting this from an FBI spokesperson. A glove found approximately 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home on Campbell Avenue. That was the glove that was found in a field near her home, has gone through preliminary results in Florida. Remember, we had been covering the fact that the sheriff's deputy sent that glove off to Florida to that private lab. Now the FBI has that glove back. They will start to enter an unknown male profile, the DNA that was taken from that glove, into what's called CODIS, and that is the FBI's DNA matching system. The process enforcement do not wear black gloves when they are investigating, because if there's blood, you can't see it. If there's residue from gunpowder or a drug like cocaine, it doesn't work with the black gloves. This glove is the closest thing that they have seen to the glove that the person was wearing when they walk up to Nancy's Nest camera at the front door. Whether the two are connected, that's what we are waiting to find out at this point. So many questions at this point, Anna. We get information, we get a piece, and then we go, okay, well, what about this? And what about this? And where was this? So we're all trying to piece this together. And again, awaiting the results of that DNA test. And unfortunately, it had to go to Florida before then going to Quantico to be tested.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and
Cuomo beat me to it again.
He always does.
So, something, you see what I mean? This is not smoking gun information. No. What they're saying is the glove that was recovered in that field apparently has male DNA on it, but they don't know who it belongs to. And they haven't said whether they put it in CODIS or not, and whether they struck out in CODIS. Now, they would have to compare it against the glove that allegedly was found in the house that was sent to Miami, that the sheriff denied even doing it after he admitted to doing it. So I'm a little confused with that also. So that is the comparison they need. But we also need is they need to do something called investigative genetic genealogy. They need to build a family tree and find out whose DNA that is on the glove that was found in the field. And if the glove that's found in the field isn't the same guy who committed this home invasion / kidnapping, it doesn't tell us anything, does it, Mike?
No, we saw how great IGG is in the Rachel Marin case from about 8 months ago. It tracked that one sex predator from California to like the East Coast. It was terrible, and it worked out really well. But that takes a long time. It's expensive, and CODIS only works if that person only gets a match if that person's DNA that you find at the crime scene is uploaded, and it makes a match with perpetrator DNA that's already been uploaded. So again, I don't want everybody to get their hopes up. This has male DNA. That's great. But it doesn't mean that it wasn't discarded by a worker 6 months ago or 3 months ago, whatever it happened to be. It could potentially be what you really need to get this to fast track the end of this case. But we don't know that. So I'm hoping people don't get their hopes up, because if it isn't that person's DNA, we still have a long way to go.
100%, Mike, and that was like very well thought of, and like everyone wants to know the answers, and guess what? We don't have the answers either, but we're following this, and we're using logic, experience, and good crime scene technology. But so far, this is the 15th of February, 15 days since she was taken / kidnapping / I don't even want to say the other part of it. Mike, your final thoughts?
Yeah, Bill, I don't want anybody to think that the FBI, and the Pima County Sheriff are fisticuffs. The cops on the ground, the FBI agents, they're working together. There may be some bruised egos, but in the end, we are all law enforcement officers, and we're all trying to get to solve this case. So there's probably a lot of, cooperation with everyone at that level. A higher up, there's egos, there's politics involved, and people's political futures. That should be set aside. The problem is if those higher up issues hurt the investigation from the start. Let's hope that didn't happen, and let's hope that the agents on the ground and the Pima County Sheriff deputies are working like a well-oiled football team, and they're doing a great job. Keep our fingers crossed for a return of Mrs. Guthrie to her family.
100%, Mike. I couldn't have said it better myself. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great day, everyone, and God bless.
One episode just ain't enough.